Great. So my name is Susie Andrews, and I teach at Mount Allison University, and I teach courses like death and food and stuff. Those are the titles of my courses. And my topic today is, for those of you who know New Kids on the Block, and I don't want to make anyone feel bad, there's this, badly, forgive me, but there's a song that goes, oh, 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 oh. Oh, 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 the right stuff. And that's what I'm going with here. Now, right now, we're going to do our first of 3 activities. And all I want you to do is, you have a tool, it's a balloon. And you have a task. I'll give you a prompt. And if it resonates with you, you can leave a balloon. Hey, Susan, I don't like the people here and I don't trust them and you don't deserve my answer. You've got a bunch of options. Don't participate. Lie. Put your balloon up when it doesn't resonate with you, right? So if you don't want to participate, you are in some way compelled, you're also welcome to leave. If it resonates with you, you lift your balloon. Now, I thought we would have looked a little different. I had expected us to stay in the room, but some people had to leave. And so when I distributed these objects around, many of you didn't see them. But for example, in front of Maria, right, there's a bowl, or over there beside Betsy, there's a mouse. And here is a, what is this? What do you think? Beads on a string, okay? And so imagine Susie in this moment realizing that her imagining of this moment was different than the reality, and then if you have compassion in you, dig down into it. If you don't, laugh and say thank you. So how many of you felt intrigued by the object you just saw? Lift the balloon if you felt intrigued. Okay. How many of you touched the object on the table? Oh, good, Sean. Oh, there's no good and bad here. Forgive me, I've already failed. How many of you spoke with someone about the new object on your table? Oh, Rachel, I didn't anticipate. It's a Mei Xiang Dao. How many of you have some questions about that object? How many of you think learning about that object could be fun? Okay, that's all right, Damien. I will take a note that you do not want to learn about that. Now, put down your balloons if you want, or keep them up because, frankly, life is horrid. And just I'm sorry, there's great joy to be had in a realm of suffering. And if holding a balloon makes you feel good, hold that balloon. But for now, I want to share with you what I hope to do as a teacher and what I hope might happen here now. Some of my friends are born researchers, but I was born a teacher and raised by parents, one of whom taught early childhood education. More on that soon. And as a teacher, there are really only 4 things I want to do, but the 4th is the most important. The first is I want to promote deep learning. And I'll unpack that a little with you in the scholarship of deep learning. Is that rigor? No, it's not. Is that creativity? Oh, you're on to me. I want to foster 21st century learning competencies. I prefer, if at all possible, to pursue equity. And finally, if there's a chance to momentarily reduce the suffering that for some people arises from the feeling of inadequacy, isolation, or being invisible, that would be my primary goal in the classroom. You might say, well then how can you ask me to take balloons because holding one makes me feel uncomfortable? I hear you, right? Well, for some people, the way I teach might be expansive and welcoming. For others, it's highly anxiety-producing. And if you want, this used to be called In Defense of Balloons, because I felt nervous about the conference and thought you'd say, get out, we don't want balloons. But I've tried to be more open. I think it's worth talking about how it can be problematic for me to pass you a balloon and ask you to play with it, right? Especially given your expectations of what university might feel like, right? Can catch you off guard. So today I'm going to make an argument that balloons form part of a teaching toolbox. that can promote deep learning, foster 21st century competencies as part of the pursuit of equity, and can temporarily, for some people, reduce suffering just for a brief flash before they return to lives of great pain. And for me, I would just like you to know that I feel great sadness and, what's the other thing? Disappointment. And so I decided the only way I would come is if I could have balloons. Christina might be like, I'm going back to Stanford. And I did those balloons, and I'm not sure why. And I was only coming if I could have balloons. So the answer for you is that you allowed Susie to join the conference, okay? After working together, besides knowing you did me a favor, you'll be able to still define participative pedagogy, because I know you already can. You'll be able to reference some research suggesting why it might matter in the university classroom. You'll be able to use balloons in your classes. I don't expect any of you will, but you would be able to if you wanted. And finally, you could create your own teaching toolbox, okay? Do I think you will? Again, likely no. But do you know what that is? It's okay. So just to make sure I'm on the same page, what is participative pedagogy? Because it wouldn't be fair to me to talk and you to listen, us to have different backgrounds, right? Very basically, as a non-expert, right? It's when we go from I give you the gift of knowledge and you receive it. It's a give, right? A transmission, to it's a shared process through which we are changed, right? And that's all I'm going to say. It's us together as learners, though there is much more to say. But I do want to talk about the why for a little longer, and the 4 things that I'm trying to do with balloons. Susie, I'm bored. I've been here 3 hours. I want to go home. A, okay, just go. B, don't worry, we have another activity in about 3 minutes. No, 5 minutes. So try to stick with us. Why? 1, well, participative pedagogy, simply raising and lowering balloons, can do a number of things. So for those of you who have already read Steve Mintz, you might know that it's satisfying and leaves you short. When we look at the scholarship of teaching and learning, here summarized by Mintz, where we go a little further into Carey, and then we get angry because, you know, what is the research? And then we start doing our own research on how people learn, right? We know things like the generation effect. You know, we learn more when you have to do it yourself. Vanessa doesn't need the word generation effect to know that, like, if you have to go and find out who the Kumari are and then teach it and find your own question, you hold it for longer and more deeply, right? Second, things like Julia's concept, cognitive disequilibrium, when things don't match up, right? And we have to sort through them. We can have new insights. This is all very familiar, but I just want it to be fair, right? Things like the spacing effect. We can use balloons, right, to say at the start of class, right, with those fancy clickers, except you prefer balloons, but it doesn't have to be. It can be Lego, right? We can do on Thursday, we say, what is the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha? What are the 3 jewels? 2 weeks later, put up your hand and say, are the 3 jewels, who is able to tell us the 3 jewels? Or 2 weeks after that, raise a green block if asceticism is one of the 3 jewels, right? So the point is, these are ways we can put into practice things like distributed learning, the testing or recall effect, the generation effect. Most importantly for me, as a person who was always confused by being a brain in a body, that one always got me. Because I've always been a body that had to remember there's a brain in there. And that's okay. It's okay to be different. But see, when we can do different things like raise balloons, or like move around, or color pictures, or build tombs, or dance, right? Then for people who have trouble, it's not a trouble, actually. When we live, if you happen to live in your body a lot, then you can use it to know in different ways. That's some of the reasons you might like balloons. It's not about the balloons, right? These outcomes, say being able to recall something, right? We know if we do it multiple times with our whole body spaced over periods, right? We can recall longer. And then in small teaching, James Hubbard, when he talks about recall as actually being important for connection making, critical thinking, things like balloons can help us too, right? critical think, because that helps us own material that we then use in new ways. It can help us collaborate, as we're about to do in a moment, if you agree. It can help us be creative. All these C's that now we sometimes talk about as the 21st learning competencies can all be born of the simple balloon on stick of plastic that is used in many different ways, right? And those are the things that, for me, as you can see from my goals, matter. So, for example, like my teaching evaluations, which I think I'm going to start to, I'm not sure what the move is, sorry. I don't know how to be a great colleague to people around the world yet, so I won't. But for me, what matters is when I get feedback like this. My courses have like 200 people because death, I think people recognize they're going to die often. And so the biggest room on our campus has 206 students. And so that's the cap for my course. And food, lots of people eat. So my point is, I mean that genuinely. That's why I choose those courses, right? Live the good life, smaller enrollment. So, sorry to laugh. But in terms of this course, I feel as if I grew as a person because it taught me a lot about compassion. When among the 300 evals I received most semesters, the ones about which I am most proud are the ones that flag things like compassion. And if you want to hear more how working with balloons develops compassion, I'd be very happy to speak to it. But I just wanted to say, I try to take seriously thinking about promoting deep 21st century learning and that learning being really about compassion, treating yourself well and others. I have to learn more about Seuss. Safe and effective use of self. That has to come in there too. So finally, right, I'll leave that aside. How is this about equity, right? Now this article, you probably feel very angry when you read it because it doesn't go far enough. But Anne Murphy-Paul does at least a good job of flagging for us in the New York Times why it might be that participative pedagogy is about equity. And I'll let her article speak for itself. At least what here matters to me. You see, you likely know that when we're participants in the classroom, our long-term recall and our ability to make connections increases for all students in the room of 206. But it's particularly for first-generation learners, people who describe or think of themselves as women, members of racialized communities, that we see that jump even more. So for me, actually, in a very real way, when I wake up in the morning, balloons, Play-Doh, ribbons are about equity. It's a way I can take, because educating, I learned from my teacher, Vanessa Sasson, is a political act. And in bringing in balloons, I'm acting in ways that are in line with what matters to me. To be inclusive to folks who are, finally, why? Like my family. Now, this is my mom. She studies Buddhism here at University of Toronto with Francis. And she decided to go to university a few years ago, I'd say 6. I can't speak for her, and I almost did a co-presentation, but while we were doing the balloons this morning, things got heated. I'm kidding, kind of. Anyhow, so I teach from learning to teach. I'm a teacher from my mom. My mom taught me about coloring. Like my mom teaches me a lot of things, but I teach, when you imagine a student, Natasha was imagining students, I was like, oh my gosh, she and I imagine different students. I imagine learning with my mom and from my mom, and Frances also sometimes imagines it too in a different way because she sees mom, right? That's what I imagine. Then I imagine my dad, my late dad. I once asked my dad, like, I love school. I don't know about you guys, but I do. And I once asked him, like, Dad, I wasn't running, but I just need to see poor brains and bodies. I was like just talking to my dad on this run, except we weren't. And I was like, Dad, who was your favorite teacher? And he was like, oh, I never had a single teacher I liked. I went to a horrible place. And I thought, oh, ha, ha, ha. What do you do with that, right? And then I said, that's too bad. And it turned out in the final years of his life, I learned he went to a place called Ealing Abbey, which is a big center of sexual abuse and assault in England for a long time. And so I thought, oh my gosh, what are schools? Oh my God, I don't know. edit it out. And so I said, oh, I see. What is a university? What is a classroom? What are humans? So to be honest, when I get up in the day, I really say this in job interviews. When people ask me, oh, how do you teach? What's your objective? I say, I try not to increase suffering. And if I can leave the home thinking I might decrease someone's suffering for a moment, then I'm okay at the end. That's why, because when I imagine students, I imagine my mom and dad and some other folks in my family who I won't tell you about. And I feel good when I read things like, I don't think I've had a teacher who challenged us to think better of ourselves. That's all I want. And I know there are really more important things like primary sources, but that's not where I'm going. So how? Well, here's how. How would you use the balloons? The right stuff. I did it to myself. So remember that I've told you balloons can promote deep learning. They can foster 21st century learning competencies. They can help us pursue equity, and they may reduce suffering for some. They do for me. The first object you need is a toolbox, in my opinion. And if you have a real one like this, that's better because you feel like you're cool. But if you don't, you can use a bag. You could use a suitcase, a police suitcase. You could even hold things in your arms. But what would you put on it? Balloons. What else? Well, oh, I'm so sorry. Well, you might have things like this. In fact, you might have the very things on your balloons. Now, what do I have to do now? You simply need to stand up and join your group. What? I won't. Okay, don't. I'm not trying to tell you, but listen to what could happen if you'll work with me. The tools. You have balloons of different colors. There are no cards named 1 to 6. This morning, Mom and I left that off the side. You join groups with your balloons. So, for example, if you have a red balloon like Winston, who I hope will come to Mount A this fall with me. I've got great ideas about how you can teach my whole class. Might join with Jeff, who also has a red balloon. And then, in your group of balloon colors, you will identify which tool. Winston, what's written on your balloon? Do you mind me asking? Crayons. And Jeff, what is on yours? Ribbon. Which of these would be more useful in your classroom? Discuss. So I'll just give you a moment to form groups and make a choice, and then we'll hear what you come up with. So the red balloons are together. Yellow might go to Vanessa because she is here with another human. I'm not sure. All right, go to. Philip has blue. I hope someone else does. It wouldn't be. Oh, good, John. I hear a lot of interesting discussion, and I hope to hear more about it. I want to encourage everyone to find a place they're comfy sitting or standing again. Why? I know there hasn't been enough time for the full discussion, but simply because if you look at my objective below, my learning objective for us is that you recall the variety of objects you could use in the classroom. And I don't expect in this discussion you will actually recall stopwatch, but there is a small chance, because it hasn't happened other times in the last few days, you'll remember that you were supposed to think about objects in the classroom because you'll be like, what was the balloon about? So just give me a moment. If you're willing to sit anywhere, or if you prefer to continue standing, I would love to move a little further in the project, knowing that I'm not doing a great job of seeing this activity through to the end. Would you be willing to have some more time with me talking? If you would, just raise your balloon. Woohoo! Okay. Thank you so much, Anne. Okay, let's see what happens. Just find a seat. There are many different ways, right, that you might be excited to incorporate balloons or Play-Doh. This stopwatch, I have gotten a lot of use out of tape measures recently in your classroom. And in saying this, hear me. I'm being genuine when I say, if I asked what you came up with, I am wholly confident that it is more effective than what I'm doing. and I look forward to hearing more about it. I'll email you, you'll email me back what I should be doing, and I'll be the better for it. For now, remember, I shared with you that we would be looking at 3 ways the right stuff can matter. And you know, a toolbox is just one of those 3. So let me flag for us 2 more ways objects would matter. Betsy, I'm so sorry. I know we've been in this, don't. I'm just saying I know that balloons may not be your thing, but let's see what happens when we use still balloons, still more balloons. Material culture. Now, I have a pair of pictures here because, you know, are the only objectives I have in the classroom the reduction of suffering? No, that's simply the principal one. Other things that interest me also interest you, like full-bodied learning beyond just the brain, right? Smelling things and touching things and eating things, right? And so, you know, here I am in, well, I'm not there actually. That's Susie's class, though, in Zhengzhou, China, practicing. I had some med students, pre-med, and they said, we want to learn about practicing medicine. So I said, no problem. You might know that I'll only have students go abroad if the money comes from somewhere else, and it's about pursuing equity. So we got 20 grand my tax money for them to go and learn from Dr. Zhao Fushui about traditional Chinese medicine. Or here we are in the frog bear work in Korea, learning about the Huayan Jing of Atamsika Flower Garland Sutra, hundreds of Flower Garland Sutra. Or here we are over here flying drones. You'll notice in none of them I'm actually pictured. Oh, that was also frog bear. That's all Marcus Bingenheimer. But did you notice that I teach 300 students maybe? Do they all go? No. And so for me, something that's important is to make it possible for people to learn in a full-bodied way. And that's why I created, initially out of a backpack, but then with more money, the Material Culture and East Asian Religions collection at Monet, right? It was from things I picked up, obviously like you, over life. And then turns out people love this idea, so they just give you more money to buy things like, I just took Zoe, actually that was gifted to us, the mouse behind Jenny or in front of Julie or beside Betsy. We just got that at the Guoguangshan's temple right by our house on Van Ness Street in San Francisco. It was $12. I have to keep the price tag on everything for my students so they know, but it was really free because the nuns just love Zozo and I, right? The point is that all of this material plays a central place in all the classes I teach. How? Well, here are some examples, right? These are movies I made with my former undergrad, who's now a big fancy scholar of Chinese religion, Maggie Mitchell at UBC. Movies introducing tankas that were given to me as wedding presents. And here's a workbook in which students are drawing Butsudan because I created a textbook for my students that has activities as though they were biochemists. So they read Fabio Rambelli and then they draw what they imagine a Butsudan would be using the internet. I mean, these kids, they're savvy. They know it's out there. And then in class, we have, we touch the Butsudan and the Kamidana. What is my point? In a class of 200, that's manageable. In a class of 30, every student owns an object from the start of the class, right? And they come in and they select their object, and all semester, they are the mouse, and they answer the question, why does stuff matter? Because if you like Ken Bain, I like him as a person very much. If you enjoy his book on what the best college teachers do, and maybe you do, or maybe you sometimes wonder what scholarship is underneath this, how does his imagining of good teaching resonate with what we know from other fields? The point is, Bain tells us the best courses have one question available to a novice learner. So my third-year students on the first day, they all come in and they own an object and answer, why does this stuff matter? And it can get quite complex. I promise you, I'm training brilliant future scholars of Chinese religion or disco dancers, right? And then there's the ownership. How else might stuff matter? Well, in a class of 200, not everybody can have their own mouse. And if you're dealing with something like the Shang Dynasty 3,500 years ago, I can't afford it. So in these unfortunate situations, we do things like, okay, this is just, maybe you've read my fascinating writing, also titled The Right Stuff on the Immanent Frame, about creating Fu Hao's tomb and comparing it to the Marquis of Ease, right? That's what we're doing here. Here, this was great. fine arts colleagues. When I teach my whole third year course around woodblock prints, an area in which I'm an expert. You know I'm not. I don't know a thing about it. But they were not too expensive, so I could buy like 50 or 100 for Monet, and each student owns a woodblock. And then my colleague, Dan Steves, is trained in the making of woodblock prints in the Japanese style, and we have all the old stuff from the 70s. So much of the semester we spend actually trying to make woodblock prints. Harder than it looks, right? Or here, this is very exciting. The provost found out that food, of course, is about food, because we cook. She said, why don't you come over for Purim and make Hamantaschen, just like Bobaschen. That's just a little song from my daughter's school. So this is us at the provost's house, the whole class. So like with 200 students, I generally try to keep the gym available during class. With 30, I gotta say I thought the provost's house would be more grand. It was fairly crowded, okay, each time we go there. But another way that objects matter, right? We can just cook and use paste and plants. I mean, we could, and may I just say, Michaela Morose, am I saying Michaela's last name correctly at Stanford, James? Her work, curating gardens, the history of Japanese gardens. Extraordinary. I mean, I'm not good at this. She's great. But my point is that's a third way the right stuff can do the trick. What is that trick again, Susan? It's being with our students in the mess that is life, reducing suffering, and hopefully promoting, long-term recall, connection making, and 21st century learning competencies. I'll end with where. Where do you do this? Well, as I said, and where do you learn to do more of this? Really something nice coming up 3 slides from now before I end. So, where? Well, one thing is the gym. Obviously, just walking in the wild garden, what do we call that thing? The waterfowl park by the school. If you just feel a little bit sad in class and nobody cares anymore, you can just go outside and walk, and you can talk, and people learn there. There's another place to do participative pedagogy, especially if your fundamental goal is reducing your suffering and those of people around you. Then like right now, if we were actually in my class and we were learning together, I don't feel too good right now, actually, and so probably I would say, like Vanessa said to me yesterday, let's just go for a walk, and then you could just do that. That's a nice teaching technique for the university, even at University of Colorado, but I might be wrong. But another place to do it, if you have the right colleagues, is in the learning lab, because as Francis can tell you, it's true. We got a grant, right, when people found out that it's really hard to teach in lines, in stadium seating, and the gym, physical education specialists don't actually want you walking around with paste in there. So it's always a bit of a negotiation. And so look at this, just like the ROM. Winston, just like the ROM, they've got these posts that we couldn't bring down or the building would have come down too. But we founded a Center for Engaged and Community Learning at Monet, and we could teach there. You could have a new space. We have no money, but do you know who does? And this is complicated. I'm glad Matt's gone because I don't know if he would think this is a good idea. Steelcase. How many of you have applied for Steelcase grants already, right?
Pilot projects.
Right now?
Oh, no, they have,
So as long as Vanessa's not applying today, you go ahead, right? Because we don't want to compete with her. We're people who are building each other up. We can get a Steelcase grant to create a new active learning space.
So like 50% of the cost or something?
The whole cost, as long as you win. You have to be in grade 6 or above. I'm only telling you because my daughter's and son's public school isn't eligible yet. So where else can you look? I was kind of surprised. I think actually the internet and my colleagues, I don't find a lot of boring stuff there, okay? For example, like when I was reading the HuffPost and Justin McDaniel was celebrated for his course, it was the one on taking the precepts. Okay, so luckily we were able to get external money for him to come and teach about despair. You know how he teaches the course for 7 hours in a row? Pen. So he could do some scheduling there, okay? Because I can't have 7 hours yet in a row, where they just read together and talk and eat. Colleagues are incredible. Over here, drumming. Maria. You really made my heart sing yesterday, and I didn't say anything because I wanted to listen to you. But I was like, Nathan Hesseling from UBC came and drummed with us. Like, he's an incredible ethnomusicologist, but the language in the articles is so perplexing, right? I was like, I hear you, right? Who else rocks? How about Venerable Dr. Rung Dao Lai when she came to teach about the history, right? Right? Like, our colleagues are extraordinary. You know who's not bad? Frances Garrett. I don't know why she's not presenting, but all of you probably know about her immersive course when her students, my mom was one of them, that's how I heard, and she's published an article on it, Role Playing in the Buddhist Studies Classroom. Gosh, that one killed me, as you know, broke me. And then I had to teach a course where all my students lived in the year 1008. And then Frances Garrett came out, and then she helped my class, and all semester I was like, do not embarrass me. It's okay. And they were like, we will not. And they were driven to the great outcome of the course, which would be Dr. Garrett's visit. You know what else she gave us? She taught my colleagues about teaching. 40 of them from all fields. And then there were administrators, too, who came to learn about hands-on, embodied practice. Am I telling the truth? Do you feel like it's being honest? Yeah. My point is, I think Frances thinks I'm overselling it, and it's hyperbole. I'm telling you, you don't get any sense of how amazing, okay? My point is this, like, where do you learn about it? I actually didn't know Amy. I was a bit nervous about her because I had heard she's a stellar teacher, and sometimes I get competitive, right? All you gotta do is call someone, and they will always help you and tell you how to be a great teacher. That's where I learn. Now, these will be the last votes. Frances was the highlight. Actually, when I said there's a good slide coming, you've already had it. This is the end of the talk. All I want you to do is vote yes or no. I was going to use flags, but it's too much. So just use those darn balloons. You see how you don't need pairs. When I try new things, and remember, you can lie or opt out. Right? Like, that's always an option. Sorry. When I try new things in my classroom, I feel support from folks in my local community. Just raise your balloon if you feel supported when you try new things. It's okay if you, okay, I was just curious. There are financial resources to try new things in my classroom. Okay, you're very lucky, yeah? Okay, wow, John, yeah, you are in heaven. I have space to try new things in my teaching. Oh! Julia, I want to come visit your space, and Philippe, if you don't mind. I can list several ways to use balloons in the classroom. That was the learning. You don't have to do it. Can anybody think of some ways to use balloons? I failed. Oh my God, that's great for the next slide. Oh, it's supposed to be, I can think of examples of epic failures by colleagues. How funny that it didn't come up, and I'm very sad for that. What a failure, right? My hope was to say, like, for me, something very comforting is to know so many stories of great failure in the classroom. And when I run out the door with my teaching toolbox, and then I'm just like, what am I going to do today? Because I live in samsara, and I'm maybe not feeling as strong about the material as I do, then I'm just like, I'm going to use cards, red cards. That's usually how I start my teaching, and then I'm like, this could go so wrong. Then I'm like, I'm going to throw the cards out. This is actually what I would do right now if I was a teacher. And I jot words on them. Dharma, mimesis, Rene Girard, okay? And then I would throw the cards in the room, and everybody would have to run to get them. And then I'd realized not everybody can run. Some people are afraid of being around each other. I've made an assumption about how bodies work, right? And I might be sad I took a risk. But then I can just think of the honest stories I know about myself and other people and their great failures. And that is what allows me to, right, keep using the right stuff to try and pursue equity and the reduction of suffering. Okay, everybody clap it out. Sorry.